Rain pressed against the grocery store windows like a living thing, cold and impatient, turning the parking lot into a sheet of trembling silver. Inside, under flickering fluorescent lights, a single father stood at the end of a long shift with aching feet and a cart that held more worry than food. He had learned that nights like this were dangerous ones, the kind where small decisions could echo for years, where kindness could cost more than he had but still feel impossible to refuse. He didn't know it yet, but before the rain stopped, the past would reach for him with a trembling hand, and a whisper from someone he barely recognized would pull his life onto a different road entirely. Before the story goes any further, take a moment to pause right here. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so stories like this keep finding their way to you. His name was Daniel Mercer, and exhaustion had become his second skin. He was 36 but looked older, not from years but from nights spent awake listening for his daughter's breathing, from mornings that began before sunrise and never quite ended. After his wife passed away 3 years earlier from a sudden illness, life had narrowed into routines sharp enough to cut. He worked days at a warehouse, evenings at a small auto parts store, and nights belonged to Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, whose smile had learned to be brave too early. Money was a constant hum in his head, a warning siren he could never turn off. Rent, school shoes, medicine for Lily's asthma, the car that coughed every winter. Every dollar had a destination before it even reached his hand. The grocery store was the last stop of the day, a necessary one. He pushed the cart slowly, calculating prices the way other people read maps, taking the longer routes through aisles to avoid temptations he couldn't afford. The rain outside made the store feel like an island, sealed off from the world, and he felt oddly suspended in time, as if nothing existed beyond the humming lights and the quiet shuffle of tired shoppers. That was when he noticed her. She stood near the end of the checkout lanes, soaked hair clinging to her face, thin coat darkened by rain. She wasn't asking for anything, not with words or signs. She simply stood there, staring at the floor, holding a small basket with a few basic items that looked too heavy for her arms. Daniel tried not to look. He hated the part of himself that noticed these things because it always led to the same war inside. He had learned the hard way that you couldn't save everyone, and sometimes trying meant letting your own child go without. Still, something about her presence felt heavier than usual, like a memory he couldn't quite place pressing against his chest. He told himself to keep moving, to finish quickly and get home before Lily fell asleep on the couch waiting for him. He joined the checkout line, unloading his carefully chosen items onto the belt, rehearsing the total in his head. The line moved slowly. The cashier's hands were red from the cold, and the register beeped in a tired rhythm. Daniel glanced over again, despite himself. The woman hadn't moved. Her basket sat on the floor now, and her shoulders trembled, not dramatically, but in the quiet way people do when they are trying very hard not to be seen. He felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the one that came when his heart argued with his fear. He remembered nights after his wife's funeral, when he had stood in this same store, staring at prices through tears, wondering how close he was to losing everything. When his total appeared on the screen, it was higher than he expected. He felt the heat of embarrassment rise, even though no one was watching. He reached into his wallet, counting carefully. He could make it work, barely. He thought of Lily's face in the morning, the way she pretended not to notice when he skipped breakfast. He thought of the woman standing alone in the rain-soaked corner of the store. He closed his eyes for a brief second, long enough to make a decision he knew would haunt him either way. He finished paying, his hands steady even as his mind raced. He gathered his bags and hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment settle. Then he turned his cart, walked back toward her, and did the simplest, hardest thing he could think of. He offered help without expecting anything in return, without knowing who she was or why she was there. The act itself felt small, almost invisible, but the shift inside him was enormous. It felt like stepping off a ledge and trusting the ground to appear. The woman looked up then, and something in her eyes changed. Recognition flickered there, faint but unmistakable, like a match struck in the dark. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. He couldn't place her face, but the intensity of her gaze made his stomach drop. She leaned closer, her voice low and shaking, and in that moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. She asked if he remembered her, and the question landed with the weight of years. Memories stirred, disjointed at first. A different rainy night, long ago. A hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and fear. A young woman crying alone on a bench, her hands clasped so tightly they shook. Daniel had been there with his wife then, waiting for news after a complicated delivery that would later take her life. He had sat beside that stranger for hours, offering nothing but silence, his jacket around her shoulders, his presence steady because it was the only thing he could give. He remembered leaving before dawn, never learning her name, never expecting to see her again. The realization hit him slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. This was her. Time had changed her, carved lines of hardship into her face, but the eyes were the same. The weight of the connection pressed down on him, a reminder that the smallest acts could echo far beyond their moment. She told him in halting breaths that his kindness that night had saved her in ways he never knew, that she had been alone, pregnant, abandoned, and terrified, that sitting beside him had given her the courage to keep going. The grocery store around them faded into background noise. Daniel felt a strange mix of disbelief and humility. He had forgotten that night, folded it into the long list of moments life had demanded from him. To hear that it had mattered, that it had become a turning point in someone else's story, left him unsteady. Yet here she was now, standing soaked and shivering, her life clearly not unfolded the way hope promised it would. She explained that things had fallen apart over the years. A bad relationship, a series of losses, choices made from desperation. She had tried to rebuild, again and again, but each time the ground seemed to give way beneath her. Tonight, she had come into the store with just enough money for a few essentials, only to realize it still wasn't enough. Pride had kept her silent. Shame had kept her rooted to the spot. And then she had seen him. Daniel listened, his heart aching with the familiar recognition of struggle. He knew that road, the one where effort didn't always equal reward, where survival felt like a full-time job. He wanted to fix everything, to lift her out of the storm, but reality pressed in. He was barely holding himself together. All he could offer was what he had already given, and the quiet understanding that she wasn't invisible. They parted soon after, the moment fragile and heavy. Daniel walked out into the rain, his groceries soaked despite the bags, his mind louder than the storm. At home, Lily was asleep on the couch, a blanket tangled around her legs. He carried her to bed, her small body warm against his chest, and felt the familiar ache of responsibility settle in. That night, sleep came slowly. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many lives brushed past each other without knowing the impact they left behind. Days turned into weeks. The encounter stayed with him, a quiet hum beneath his routines. He found himself more patient with Lily, more aware of the strangers around him. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and addressed in careful handwriting. Inside was a note from the woman at the store. She explained that after that night, something had shifted. She had reached out for help she had been too afraid to seek before. She had contacted a legal aid organization, found resources, begun the slow work of rebuilding again. She thanked him not for the money or the groceries, but for remembering her, for seeing her when she felt erased. The letter included something else, unexpected, an offer of help. The organization she now worked with was looking for reliable people, and she had spoken highly of him. It wasn't charity, she emphasized. It was an opportunity. Daniel stared at the words for a long time, his hands trembling slightly. He had learned not to trust hope easily, but this felt different. It felt earned, not given. When the job came through, it changed everything quietly. Better hours, stability, enough room to breathe. Lily noticed first, of course. She noticed when he smiled more, when he had time to help with homework without glancing at the clock, when he could afford small luxuries like ice cream on a random Tuesday. Daniel noticed too, in the way the constant knot in his chest loosened, just a little. Months later, on another rainy evening, Daniel found himself back at the same grocery store. The rain no longer felt like an enemy. As he walked through the doors, he saw her again, this time standing taller, her coat dry, her eyes brighter. They shared a moment of silent acknowledgement, a mutual understanding that some connections didn't need words to be real. Life hadn't become perfect for either of them, but it had become possible, and that felt like a miracle. As this story begins to close, take a moment to think about the times you chose kindness even when it cost you, or the moment someone else's kindness carried you through the dark. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can keep spreading hope. And before the final moment fades, leave a comment below telling us about a time a small act changed your life, or a time you wish you had chosen kindness. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs tonight. Daniel never considered himself a hero. He was just a tired father doing his best in a world that rarely made room for mistakes. But on a rainy night in a grocery store, he learned that even the smallest light could travel farther than anyone expected. And sometimes, when the past whispers your name, it isn't there to haunt you, but to remind you that you mattered, and that you still do.